Hey babes, I'm Miss Mila Rose and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am resuming my Storytime series with one of the hardest, if not the hardest part of my childhood story to talk about. So there are going to be some warnings. This video is going to talk heavily on an OD. If this is something that is triggering to you, please click off this video. I never intend to trigger anyone with my stories. I only want to share my experiences in order to help share the wisdom that I have with others who may be going through things similar, or who might know someone who's going through something similar, or might go through something similar in the future. So with that out of the way, and with those of you who are remaining here today, let's get into today's very heavy topic, right into today's story time. As a brief review as to what happened in my last story time, what I talked about, the previous year after I'd broken up with my boyfriend, I had been really struggling with, if not multiple eating disorders. Before I start off this story time with my 11th grade, there were a couple experiences I had in the summer, instances of domestic violence that I recall that took place in the home. I particularly remember one day that I really got into it with my mother, and my mother would generally get my father involved to side with her and deal with the kids, and so he had come at me and he had punched me pretty hard in the face to the point where I was spitting blood out of my mouth. And I remember I was actually going on a lot of jogs in the Humber with my brother during the summer. So I actually went out in the Humber, I left the house, and I just needed to escape. And my brother, I remember he had come with me and we walked pretty far, and I kept spitting out blood for the first chunk of the walk. We went all the way around towards the very end of the trail and eventually made our way back home. I remember that was really nice that my brother came with me during that time. I don't remember exactly what situation occurred and everything that happened. I do remember that that walk really helped calm me down, and being able to have that support from my brother was really nice. The second experience that I remember happening, and again, I don't completely remember what happened. Again, lots of conflict with my mother. I was always screaming with her in the house, screaming matches all the time, and I must have gotten into one of these disputes with her, again, a screaming match. Whenever there was conflict in the house, my brother would just get up and leave, and he was okay to do that. I mean, he was 7 years older than me, but like, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do that because he does that, and I need to get out of the house for right now, and I need a break, I need an escape. So I left the house, and it was really late at night already. It was like probably closer to 8-9 o'clock, but the sun was maybe even like past 9. The sun was like starting to set. I was going through my head and trying to calm down and relax and unwind as I was walking around the neighborhood and going for a late night stroll, really just trying to clear my head and collect myself and really de-stress my nervous system. When I was finally making my way closer to home and deciding I would start heading back home, I remember seeing a bunch of my friends had been hanging out, and they saw me and they started freaking out, and they came over to me and they're like, you know, the cops are looking for you. I was like, what do you mean? And so I was like, okay. So I started walking down the bridge towards my house, and I see these police officers like with flashlights looking around in the area, and when they saw me, like, they went over to me, they asked me who I was. I remember one of the police officers grabbed me really sternly with his hand, and I wasn't resisting at all. I was just there, and he's like, oh, since you're not resisting, I'm not going to put you in handcuffs. And I was like, okay. And so he started walking me towards my house, and he put me in the car, and I remember the police car. This, I'm pretty sure, was the experience where I figured out my mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia. The police officers were having a conversation in the front seat while I was seated in the back seat, and they were going over the file. There were so many cop calls to my house because of all of the incidences that took place, it was nothing new for them to show up over some sort of a situation occurring. I remember being in the backseat crying, and so the police officers were like, "Why are you crying?" Like, he was so rude, he was so obnoxious, and I was like, "Oh, you wouldn't understand, like, I don't remember, I just didn't like really talk to him really, like he seems like really rude and very disingenuous." And they were saying how they were going to take me to a hospital for testing. I guess my father had called to look for me and said that I was on drugs. So like, I literally have never smoked a cigarette in my life. I've literally never experimented with any drugs before. Obviously, I don't have any drugs in my system, but they took me to a hospital and they locked me in this room. And I remember twice throughout the night, they had people come in and take blood and blood pressure checks on me and stuff. And they had me speak to like 2 different therapists. One that was just like not really verbal and I didn't really talk to, and another one that I talked to a little bit, and honestly he seemed really nice. He was telling me how like things get better, and I remember I was crying. There was like tissue there I was using, and my room was like kind of open for a portion of the night, but then because I needed to use the bathroom, I was like body checking myself in the mirrors, and then I remember they locked my door so I couldn't leave even though I really needed to use the bathroom. And I didn't sleep all night. Like, it was so cold. It was just like this bed, and I don't even remember if there was like a sheet or anything. It was just awful. I didn't sleep a wink. I also hadn't showered in like a day, so I really didn't feel good about myself at all. I had like this sweater hoodie on and I looked like a street hoodlum, probably, honestly, because I was just so gross looking. I remember in the morning I got like this nasty looking plate of food that, because I wasn't gonna eat it, I just made like food art out of it because I was so beyond bored out of my mind. They gave me this paper. Honestly, I don't even feel comfortable sharing what the paper said on YouTube, just because some of you will understand that this stuff was just like not accurate at all, and I know that, but some of you be like, "Oh, maybe there's something there, haha." Yeah, I understand that there are people here on my YouTube channel that are both the real ones and also are not the real ones. So for that reason, I am not going to be sharing every detail of my story here on the internet. But I was really upset. I literally just made paper airplanes with the papers that I had, and also I remember when I got there, I made a phone call home like, what the heck's going on kind of thing, because I don't even think I got to speak to my family at all. They literally just put me in the car and took me with them. Finally in the morning, my family did come to get me and pick me up, and it was like the most weird moment ever where I'm just like, not really content with them being there, but like also not wanting to be at the hospital. So it was just a really weird situation, honestly. Like, the whole hospital situation was so traumatizing to me because I kind of felt like a prisoner. I kind of felt like I was being treated like a drug addict. I kind of felt like I was being treated as like someone who was committing crimes even though I didn't do anything wrong. Like, the whole situation just was really traumatizing for me to experience, honestly, and probably one of the hardest times in my life too. I think the only reason why I'm like okay with telling you the story about it is simply because I know that I'm not a criminal. I know I'm not a drug addict. I know there's no reason why they should have taken me to the hospital, but they did, simply because my father told them I was on drugs. And I think also, like, part of my struggles in life are really about being taken seriously, because a lot of the times when the police officers would be called to the house and they would be involved, I would always be demonized by my parents because they found me as the perfect person to put their blames on for being the problem child that was responsible for all of the issues going on. They were able to put blame on something and say this is the problem and hyperfixate on that thing, which was me. And I didn't have a voice really because I was a child, and not only a child but a female child, which makes it so much worse because men really do not take females seriously. I feel that very heavily. Even when you're an adult, females don't really get taken seriously by men, and predominantly police officers are men, and even the women that are police officers, they have this inferiority complex where they feel like they need to be taken seriously, so they're gonna act in a certain way too. I did have one encounter with a female police officer, and I think that she was honestly so horrible and rude and so heartless. I said there was 2 mini stories, but there is a third that I do remember. But let's get started going into my 11th grade here in high school. Let's find some normalcy here for a moment while we get into things. This semester in high school, I am taking one of the hardest classes I taken the entire time I was in high school, and this was chemistry. And honestly, it wouldn't have been nearly as bad if it wasn't for the fact that I was dealing with all of these issues going on at home. My brother was always the go-to person I went to for help with maths and sciences because he was really good at these. He majored in physics, so he was also just like really smart and a straight A student. So he was always advocating for pushing to help me with my homework, with my schoolwork, and teaching me maths and sciences. And he was honestly pretty patient with me too. Like when I would voice, like, I just don't get it, he would realize like I truly didn't get it, and he would really try to figure out how to teach me and get me to understand it. So it kind of taught him how to teach in a way too, but also it was very helpful and encouraging of me. Whereas my mother would try to get involved and she didn't even understand the material, so it would take her, like, she would be like struggling to like figure it out and then try to explain it, and then she'd be like, why don't you get it? I don't understand why you don't get it. And like just be honestly so horrible. Like I hated every experience where my mother tried to help me with anything related to school so much. Like it just made me frustrated. And honestly, I think I still deal with stuff like that today, where if I can't understand something and I can't get something and something's challenging for me, I get a little triggered and I get really hard on myself. I really do think that that's where it stems from, is where my mother was just really berating on me for not being able to understand what to her seemed like such easy concepts and formulas. Chemistry class, aside from the material, was honestly kind of an enjoyable class. I had a Vietnamese friend in high school that I met in 9th grade English class who we really bonded with each other over anime and manga, and I had her in this class. I helped her a lot with English because she struggled with it because she came to Canada, I think she said in the 6th grade, so it was not her first language. So she did struggle a little bit, and I tried my best to help her. And she was really good with math and science, so she tried to help me with those. We were more surface level friends, at least at this time. She didn't really know too much about what was going on with me, and I didn't really know much about her life. I think I'm gonna name her Tracy. So Tracy sat in front of me in chemistry class, and at the very start of the school year, my teacher decided to seat us herself. So she just like randomly picked places for us to sit. She's like, you sit there, you sit there. And there is this guy who is seated in my class who she had sit next to me, and he was pretty cute. I'm not gonna lie, I had a crush on him. Chemistry really was like my biggest focus because it was the class that I was struggling with the most. I really just wanted a passing grade in this class, and that was my goal. At the very start of the semester, I was getting straight A's because we were covering very basic terms, but as soon as we started getting into things like formulas and equations, that is when I started just getting completely lost. Plus, there's a lot of things going on in the home. Let's get into 2 of the incidents that occurred. Honestly, the first one was quite enjoyable. I don't remember exactly what happened. Honestly, I don't even think I was really present for most of it. I know that my father and my mother got into some sort of scuffle, so the conflict was between those 2 predominantly. I think my mother broke my father's glasses and she was getting physical with him, so my father ended up calling, I don't know where, probably 911, and my mother ended up being taken into a psych ward where she stayed for like 5 days. This wasn't the first time that she was admitted. She was admitted to a psych ward the first time when I believe she was originally diagnosed with schizophrenia back in the summer after I'd finished 4th grade. I believe that was like the first story time I told here on YouTube. My father really got very stressed during this 5-day period because I think he started feeling like all of the responsibilities to take care of the household and everything was on him. Honestly, for me, it was the most pleasant experience ever not to hear my mom screaming 24/7, because when she was home, I would be getting ready for the day. She'd be screaming and yelling in the house. I would leave the house and start walking to school, and I would hear her screaming and yelling all the way down the street until she was out of range. And upon arriving home after school, I would gradually start hearing her louder and louder. As I got closer to my house, her screaming and yelling. I would enter the house, she's screaming and yelling, and I would go about my evening with her screaming and yelling throughout the evening, and then try to finally get some shut-eye. If there is anything that went wrong in the night, my mother's getting up and having a screaming and yelling hissy fit. So having 5 days of my mother gone from this household was bliss. I was pumped. I was so pumped. I was like, I'm gonna do a morning routine. I'm gonna wake up early. I'm gonna go into the basement and get my workout in. I'm gonna take care of all of my schoolwork. I'm gonna have the perfect routine. I'm gonna be so motivated. I'm so pumped. I literally was the happiest I had ever been at home during this 5-day period. And it was so awesome that she was gone for 5 days. I never knew when she was gonna get home, and we did go see her in the hospital at one point. I know she did say that they had her like completely restrained to the bed in like an X pose, and they had her on a lot of medications. When she finally did arrive home 5 days later, she was so weird. Like, I think I talked about this before, but like she was acting incredibly vulnerable, like a child. And I think she was very drugged up too. And of course, I think she completely stopped taking her prescription medication because she reverted back to her regular behaviors. So yeah. The next incident that takes place is another one where I am kicked out of the house. So I really am kind of kicked out of the house 3 separate times for overnight stays at different places: adoptive family, a hospital, and now the 3rd place, the youth without shelter. Remember when I said I had my sweet 16? Well, this was kind of great news for me because I was no longer in the system with the children's aid. I was of age where they no longer had responsibility over me. So what do the police officers do then when they're called to the house over something going on? Well, they can't get the children's aid involved because they no longer have a legal obligation to work with me. However, there was a youth without shelter that existed, and they brought me there where I was to be admitted and enrolled in the system kind of semi-permanently. Now let's talk a little bit about the youth without shelter, because yes, I'm sure they're doing great things for these kids, but of course, I'm sure, like, as all the rumors go, at least my mother talked about these things. I will give my mother some credit and say, like, she wasn't a complete idiot. She was insanely crazy and incredibly volatile, but she wasn't a complete idiot. I do believe that a lot of these kids probably did have more access to drugs and stuff. I mean, with all of the situations that are going on, like, I'm sure it wasn't the best social environment, so to speak, to be a part of. So when I was admitted there, I arrived, they had me fill out all of this paperwork, and they kind of showed me around. They basically gave me a bag of essentials, like some shower stuff that was free to use, your bare necessities essentially. They showed you your locker, because everyone had a tiny little dinky locker that was your storage, your space. There was one kid there that was so interested in my arrival, and honestly it creeped me the hell out because all I got was the ick factor. Honestly, if I had to compare this kid to anyone in anime, it is the ball guy from My Hero Academia. The little diaper wearing ball haired guy. That creepy icky guy. This guy is comparable to him. If he had an anime character lookalike, that is what he'd look like. Complete ick factor. I did not get good vibes or good intention vibes from him. Anyway, they showed me my bed, living area, quarters. I don't even completely remember if there was like other people in my room, There might have been, I really don't remember. I just remember sleeping the night. In the morning, I got up, I got myself as together as I could without doing any real showering or anything. I knew where I was because it really was very close to home. And I was heading out, and there was like a front desk area, and they were like, "Where are you going?" And I was like, "I'm going to school." And they're like, "What do you mean you're going to school? You're not allowed to go to your school. You just got here. You just got admitted." I was like, "What do you mean I'm not allowed to go to school?" And that was like the biggest flag for me too, this whole like system. I was like, no, this is not right. This is not good. They're trying to tell me I can't go to school, like literally the thing that I need more than anything else in my life right now. No. And so I was like, I'm going to school. And I left. And truth be told, the first place I went to was actually to my house because I needed a shower and I needed my backpack and my textbooks and all my school stuff. And I got to my house, I knocked on the door, I was let in. My mother was really angry with me for, I guess, showing up, and she started her yelling and screaming fit. And honestly, like, I was a really big brat at the time, like really like pissed off with my mother, but also like, I'm literally gonna go shower, get my stuff and go to school, like get out of my way. And so I went to do exactly that. I went to school and just carried on as normal with my school life. Day-to-day life after this was relatively regulated for a bit, and predominantly my biggest challenge was just trying to learn chemistry, and every day after school I would spend time with my brother, and he would try to help me learn the new material that I was being taught and try to help me so I could pass tests and stuff. I did still struggle with my eating, body dysmorphia, and things like that. This was just something that was a part of my life now. Since I had gotten into all this stuff, it had become a very OCD obsession of mine and an addiction that I couldn't just quit or forget about. So just assume through my story times, until I let you know that I've recovered, where I stopped doing a certain behavior, that it is a present consistency in my life. But I already talked about that in the last episode, so I'm not going to be graphic about it today. We're going to get into the final portion of today's episode, and this is going to be the hardest part that I'm talking about. So again, if you are triggered, this is your final warning. Please click off this video now. Okay, for those of you who are still here, let's get into the final part of this episode. And this is the story time portion of my father's OD. So the current time of year is about late October. It is about a week or so, maybe 10 days, or about a week before Halloween, somewhere around there. I don't remember the exact date. I just remember it was late October. I remember as I was waking up, I heard the garage door going. And I thought that was weird, but I didn't think too much of it. My dad routinely woke up every single morning at like 6:30 in the morning, every single morning. My dad was very, very anal about his routine. When he would smoke his cigarettes, which were pretty much on the hour every hour, when he would wake up, when he would go to bed, he was very anal about these things. So it was normal for him to be the first one awake in the house and the first one to be going to bed at night. What was not normal is when I finished getting ready for the day to go to school, I went downstairs and my father was not home. Now I remembered and recalled hearing the garage door, but again, I didn't think much of it. I simply left the house and I went to school. Now upon arriving home after school is when things got a little weird. First of all, when I got home, my mother immediately started screaming. Well, you heard her screaming and yelling down the street, but when you entered the house, because that was normal, right? Like hearing her scream and yell down the street before getting home, that was normal. That was normal. Nothing wrong there. Nothing wrong, just everyday stuff. You get in the house and my mother is accusing me of, I'm just completely caught off guard. She's like, "What did you do? You and your father made a plan. You've devised something. You went to hiding." Like, I don't even remember what accusations she was spewing. She was just accusing me of stuff, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't even know what's going on here. I don't know what's going on. And my mother is, I'm slowly realizing that my father isn't home still. And I was like, okay, that is a little weird, but what the heck? I didn't do anything. But then I did recall, like, oh, I heard the garage door this morning and I didn't see him in the morning. And so that was probably him. But yeah, he's not home right now. But I don't know, I didn't think too much of it. But he didn't show up that day or that night. And the next day, he didn't show up either. And then the next day, it was now the weekend and my father was still nowhere to be seen. I had already had a suspicion as to what was going on. And honestly, at this point, it would have been too late. Honestly, it would have been too late by the time I got home that first day. There's no way I could have known before then, honestly. But I was sitting on the computer in my brother's room and he was like, I wonder where he went. I was like, you know where he went. Like, it's obvious. Like, to me, it was so obvious where he went and what he did. Like, I knew. I just had this knowing. Call it intuition, call it a spiritual nudge, call it just a calculated guess. But my brother's like, what do you mean? Like, where do you think he is? What do you think he did? And I was like, well, obviously he went to the Humber ravine area by our house and overdosed, and he did that there, probably. And he's like, should I go check? Should I go look? And I was like, if you want to. Honestly, thinking about it now, like, me choosing not to go, I was protecting myself from seeing a sight that I knew would be very traumatizing and scarring to me. And I do feel really bad that my brother ended up seeing what he saw, and I'm sure that that was very traumatizing and not pleasant for him to see. But I remember my brother leaving the house and saying that he was gonna go take a look. And not too long after, you hear him barge through the door, huffing and puffing, and clearly disheveled emotionally. And my mother's asking him what's wrong, and he's freaking out, and he's rushing to the phone to call 911. And he's spewing out the words, I found my dad. And the ambulance arrives, police officers arrive. I'm in the house this entire time upstairs. I did not want to go see the body. My mother is like, I want to go see, it's not real, I want to go see the body. And she goes, and she comes back and she's like, that's a dummy, that's not real, that's a fake, that's a prop. And she was in disbelief. My mother never, to my knowledge, I'm no longer in contact with her, never to my knowledge admitted to his passing. And I just know that the ambulance was present, that the police officers were present, that they retrieved a body that allegedly I think my brother was talking about how he was very blue colored because he had been there for quite some time, probably about 3 days, and he had passed. And again, the whole time my mother's in disbelief, and I never shed a single tear from my father's passing. And I don't know what this makes of me, but all I know is that I watched my father suffer my entire life. And I'm not gonna say that he made the right decision. I wish that I wasn't expecting this. Give me a moment. When I say I've never shed a tear for him, I've never shed a tear for losing him. What it really is the sadness of the situation. Give me a second. Okay, I'm gonna try and get through this. I understand that there is a lack of resources for males in particular, and advocating for men's mental health is something that's so important, And honestly, you can call me a simp for men a lot of the times because of what I watched my father go through. Like, he would just be trying to live his life and my mother would just be berating him every single day and to no end, and would never give him the peace of mind. And sure, he could have probably been already struggling with things from his past, but my mother wasn't a person of support. My mother was a person who made the situation so much worse. And he did have like some sort of a therapist or something, but I don't know how those sessions went. Like, I know he was on medications, I know he had like anti-stress medications and things like that, but the whole situation was just pretty messed up, and I don't necessarily think that he had the support system that he needed. And I saw him suffer his entire life, so I was never sad of losing him. I mean, honestly too, like, I had memories of him from when I was a child before the first time he was hospitalized, where there was positive memories, where he would teach me colors and numbers and counting with pennies and quarters and nickels and things. And he had gotten me a Powerpuff Girls outfit when I was a child because I was obsessed with Powerpuff Girls. And there was moments, but he really was like gone mentally like the majority of my life. Like, from the time I was in kindergarten till this time, and there was very few moments where he even showed he had life in him, if that makes any sense. So it almost felt relieving for him to have passed, because it's like he no longer has to suffer. Like, not that that was the best outcome, but I didn't know what else to do. Like, what was I supposed to do in that situation? How could I have known that there was resources that I could have helped with him for? I don't know. Like, I'm just saying, no, I don't think I would ever tell anyone that that is like the best option. But I think he did end a lot of suffering in that moment, regardless of what the other options were at that time, because times are different now. At that time, all I know is that his pain ended there. I remember my mother and my brother did spend a lot of time crying together the first couple of days, and I did bash my mother a lot one of the nights, that just saying like, you know why he did it, like, it's all your fault, like, you berated him every single day, like, you were awful to him. And she was in so much denial. Like, how could she hear any of that? Like, she had gone through something so traumatic that she couldn't even accept the reality of what had happened. And so she was literally like back in this childlike state, just like sobbing and crying and vulnerable. And I'd never seen my mother like that when she was not drugged up. So it was kind of wild. When it came talks to the funeral, my brother was in contact with my father's sister and her husband, my aunt and uncle. They were going to arrive for the burial, and they were going to do that by themselves, and they were coming all the way from Sudbury. My brother and I did go and attend the funeral together. My mother refused to come because she believed it was a hoax. She believed the whole thing was a setup, that it was fake, that there was no body, or that the body wasn't, like, he was on vacation somewhere with some side chick in a different country or something, is what she imagined the reality to be. I don't know. I did attend the funeral with my brother specifically for him because he was going through it a lot more than I did. Again, he was 7 years older than me, so I'm sure he had a lot more positive experiences with my father when he probably had a lot more life in him too. I remember at the funeral, I allowed him space and for him to spend time with the coffin. It was closed casket because the body was not preserved. It was very old, and I was on the other side of the room on the couch letting him do his thing. Honestly, I didn't really want to participate much. I was really just there for my brother because he was really struggling, and I can see that it was really affecting him. I don't know how much I talked about it, but my brother definitely struggled with anorexia. Again, he was also really obsessed with his weight, and he got into it before I did. I mean, again, he's 7 years older than me, so of course, like, he went through stages in his life before I did, but he did refuse to eat a lot of times and had a lot of body dysmorphia and did want to be skinnier and skinnier and skinnier and had this desire and was very open and talked about it a lot. And so I knew he had his own issues and mental challenges, and I just wanted to be there to support him because I was the only one in the situation that wasn't really torn over what was going on. So the funeral did take place sometime in the future. I don't remember how long until it took place, but since the body was found on the weekend, when I arrived at school on the Monday, I had never told any of my friends what was going on, but because there was such a chaotic mess on the street, because the incident did kind of take place outdoors, the ambulance, the police officers were all outdoors. I guess a lot of talk spread around the neighborhood. There was 2 streets that were loop-de-loop courts, and both streets talked a lot about what was going on, and there was one family on one of the streets that was really close to my friend Marie and her family, so they actually got the intel of what had happened before I got to school on Monday. So she had let all of my friends know what had happened, and they all saw me, and they were all immediately like rushing over to me, like really like not sure how to react with me, but wanted to be there for support for me. And I just remember them being a little bit baffled but also stunned that I was so emotionless and detached from the whole situation. They're like, why aren't you sad? Why aren't you upset about this? And again, like, I didn't feel like I lost anyone. A, he wasn't present the most of my life. B, like, I felt like his suffering had ended, so it was almost like a good thing, not something that was sad. And so that was really nice that my friends were there, that they were trying to be there to support me. I think everything quickly just went back to normal at school since I didn't have an emotional reaction. Things at home though were weird and did not normalize. My brother and my mother were very emotionally charged at this time. Well, that's where I'm going to leave this story time for now. The next episode is going to be another very challenging one to talk about. So if this has been challenging for you, maybe don't watch my next episode. But I promise you, after next episode, I will not be talking about something challenging for the foreseeable future. So yay, good news to being able to get over the hard hump, right? Anyway, I know that this episode has been really hard to talk about. I know that this episode has been really hard to listen to. I thank you for sticking it out with me, and I really hope that this helps someone out there. And so those of you who might be going through something similar, or who has gone through something similar, like maybe it can help you with your processing and just knowing that you're not alone and that you're not the only one, and that if you need someone to talk to, please, please, please seek support. There are so many more resources today than there used to be, which is really good news for all of us, even though times are still really challenging in today's day and age. But anyway, that is where I'm going to leave today's story time. If you liked this video, please give me a big thumbs up. Subscribe down below, turning on that notifications bell so you don't miss my next video coming very soon with a continuation of my story. Bye for now, till next time.